After that introduction, if there's no further questions, that's all I have to say. The volume of change of the last 25 years, people think has been a lot. Think of where we were. If we had this discussion 25 years ago, the issue would have been to have a nuclear war or not to have a nuclear war, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. 25 years today is going to be far more of a volume of change than before. The reason I say volume is that we're used to seeing line charts. Here's the GDP per capita, here's the energy efficiency, here's this, and here's that. But that's not the way the world works. The world is an integrated system like our body. So the things that have made the change over the last 25 years, those things are accelerating. So it's the acceleration of the acceleration, like CERN, the acceleration of particle accelerator. That's what's happening, and we are constantly making decisions based upon things that are in the past. For example, in the early 1980s, I was putting in what was called X.25. These are switches that make the internet now today cheap. And USAID and the State Department of the United States said, we aren't going to do that stuff. We could have had the internet full-blown in the early 1980s worldwide. The switch cost about $1,000. The most expensive thing was to bring an engineer into the country to plug it in. We're constantly making decisions based upon things as if they're going to change at the same rate. You know, we had all this amount of change, well then 25 years we'll have the next amount of change. That's not what's happening. It is reasonable to assume that we will have the functional capability of a genius distributed in the world within 25 years. If you have charge-coupled devices in your lenses, you have voice recognition through around the world, all kinds of collective intelligence systems in 25 years. You take an IQ test, you should be able to score top, right? Yeah? We've got give them knowledge and socialize them, right? We're moving into an area, we all know it intuitively, but we don't have it in our policies yet. We're moving into an area where knowledge and intelligence is a driving force of everything, right? So teaching content, you got to give them something, so I'm not against that. You got to have socialization, that's a good idea. But we should increase intelligence and objective. We know that a little child will develop the brain better if you give consistency of love and diversity of environment. That's why you have the little thing hanging down over the... But the trouble is you leave it there the next day. That's boring. The poor brain says, I saw this yesterday. What do I got to wire myself for? So put little colors on it, or different little lights on it. Keep changing all the time. As long as you guarantee consistency of love, you can give diversity of environment like crazy. The brain wires. We also know that the factors that increase the food price around the world, there's about 17 I've listed, are all going in the wrong direction, which means that meat, for example, is going to be priced out of the market for poor people. Without iron and protein, the brain does not develop properly. One of the reasons Africa's got a problem is because the child comes off the breast in a couple of years, or a year and a half or so. Another child comes on, the third one's now 3 or 4 years old. They don't have the iron and protein. They get kwashiorkor, protein malnutrition. The brain does not develop. It's reasonable to assume the large numbers of Africa have a problem with that. If we can get iron and protein together in the Hershey chocolate bars or things like this, we can change Africa in a generation. These kinds of decisions are not being made. And I've talked to Hershey Chocolate about this. They're not doing it yet. Slovenia itself can create a collective intelligence system for the country. By collective intelligence, what I mean is 3 factors that can change each other and are interdependent. 1 are human brains, 2 is information, and 3 is decision support systems and mathematical models and so forth. In the old days, you go to you had the wise ones come around, you have a discussion, you make a decision, right? Then along comes the internet, you have to do your searches, I need the information, you make a decision. Then along comes the mathematician and say, no, you need a model, you need decision support systems, then you make a decision. Well, the answer is use all 3, but they change each other on an ongoing basis. We did this for the Prime Minister's office at Kuwait. We did one for climate change in Korea. And the Millennium Project is doing one for the future right now. Because we need to keep track of all of the ideas of the world, and it's not an impossible task, integrate the human brains with that information, put that into decision support systems and modeling, have that go back into who you're going to pick to do this stuff, have that change the information, and on it goes. So one of the most important ways increasing intelligence is responding to feedback. People keep saying you need feedback systems. That gives you information overload, unless you feed back. It's the feedback that closes the loop that causes the neural wiring that makes you smarter. Another one is contact with intelligent people. We know this. But you can't have 99%, no political problem here, you can't have the 99% hanging out with 1%. Physically, it can't be done, right? But you can do it in cyberspace. Everybody can have a simulation with Albert Einstein teaching them algebra. Imagine having Einstein as your personal mathematics teacher. No, everybody can do this. Another thing is that you can have, one thing we know intuitively is belief systems. We know that in medicine, we make a judgment in medicine that if you act like you think you're going to get sicker, that's worth about 10% getting sicker. And nobody knows it's 10%, but we all say that and we agree with it, so okay. And if you think you're going to get better, that's worth another 10%, getting better. That's a 20% spread. Apply that to IQ. So let's say you're an average IQ, 100 IQ. That's 120 IQ. It's not too bad, just by thinking it so. You can think yourself stupid, and you can think yourself smart. Well, you may not be able to think yourself into a genius at first. But then you might, like for example, homework assignment for everybody. I want you to do a Google search on 2 words together, increasing intelligence. You do that, follow the links, keep on going, don't get interrupted for half an hour. I guarantee it's going to change your mind about your mind. Increasing intelligence. A trans institution has a governing body, and a trans institution can be for anything. It can be for AIDS, it can be for increasing intelligence, it can be for selling hot dogs, like any organization. You've got for-profit organizations, non-profit organizations. I want a third category called trans institutions. No country's done that. Germany almost did it, but the guy left the parliament, pissed me off. The U.S. hired him away. You can't trust the United States sometimes. Anyway, the idea of a trans institution is the governing body has on it at least 1 or 2 from government, at least 1 or 2 from business, at least 1 or 2 from universities, at least 1 or 2 from NGOs, at least 1 or 2 from international organizations or somebody like that. And maybe 1 or 2 that should be there just because of who they are in the country, right? Or in that activity. Now, the people then who do the work come from all these categories, but not a majority of any one. The money comes from all these categories, but not a majority of one. And that you have to prove in an annual report that you've given value to all those categories, but not a majority of any one. What's the advantage of this? One, whatever you do has to make sense to the bottom line, because business is there. It has to make political sense because the government's there. It has to make sense knowledge-wise because the universities are there. It has to make sense to values because NGOs are there. It has to be internationally sensitive because the UN or some international organization is there. And it means that you can act through all those categories when you need to. So when the act of the organization makes sense through the universities, you're there. You're already there. Now, I'm not talking about a public-private partnership. That's good. It's a transition. It's a good idea. But that's not a trans institution. A trans institution is a new entity. It is a thing itself. It's not a once a month meeting. It's like a corporation. It's a corporation, but it's a trans institution corporation. It's not a for-profit or non-profit. And the Millennium Project, people have evaluated it and comes away saying, I don't know how you get all this sort of stuff done on such a small budget and such a small staff and all that sort of stuff. We're organized as a trans institution so that when we need to be government, we can act through governments. I won't mention all the government names, but you can guess. When we need to act through universities, we've got university courses all around the world. Over 1,000 universities use our annual State of the Future report. By the way, commercial ad. If you do a Google on Millennium, 2 L's and 2 N's, we're not French, 2 L's and 2 N's, -project.org. Go on there and you can get the annual State of the Future report. The short version is about 100 pages. Long version is about 13,000 pages. So keyword search it. You don't read the whole thing. You'll go nuts if you do that. The 15 global challenges, very quickly. One, these are the questions, this is the agenda. First, how can we have sustainable development in the framework of climate change? Two, how can we have safe water without conflict? The water tables are going down around the world. China's already had mass migrations, and I don't mean the Three Gorges Dam, I mean the water was dry, and they had a forced migration. Forced migrations into areas cause conflicts. Half the world is potentially unstable because of just that one phenomenon right now. 40% of the world gets their water today from watersheds controlled by 2 or more countries. 3, population and resources in balance. That's pretty obvious. Democratization. How do we have real democratization? Organized crime takes about twice the amount of money a year than all the military budgets put together in the world. The United States is about half the military budgets of the world, and that is much less than all the organized crimes of the world. So you take the entire military infrastructure of the world, including Veterans Administration hospitals, everything. That's half the cash per year of organized crime. And of course you can say, well, the organized crime is not one integrated system. Well, neither are all the militaries of the world either. All right? That makes a mockery of democracy. You can buy and sell decisions like you buy and sell heroin on a global basis. Global perspectives. We have to make our decisions based upon long-term global perspectives. That's the early part I was talking about. We're making decisions based upon the past all the time. The global convergence of information, communications, and technology, how do we make that work for everybody? It is reasonable to assume that everybody that wants access to internet will have it within our lifetime. It's an extraordinary comment. We're not teaching people how to use the world's knowledge on a regular basis to become more intelligent. Like, for example, not to embarrass everybody, but how many people use Google Alerts? And yes, I do own stock in Google. How many people, all right, Google Alerts, second homework assignment. Do a Google on Google Alerts, and then answer the question, what are the most important words to your life, or your business, or your country? Most important, your judgment. You put them in, and then once a day, Google does a global search, lines it up, and you get a little email saying, here are the most important news items on what you think is the most important thing for you. Every day you should have that. So if I come back next year to the Bled Forum or Ljubljana Forum or one of them, I want to see everybody's got their own intelligence system working for them. Rich-poor gap. We know that the market is a driving force of change. But we got to have global ethics. The 2008 made the case pretty clearly that ethics matters. You know? Ethics matters. So we don't have to have an argument on whether you have markets or not. That's clear, you've got that. But one of the things we haven't done, and this is an implication for the future of employment, is in the past you went somewhere to a market. You went somewhere for a job. Right? That's the past. Today, you can say, I'm the center of a world market of 2 billion people. There's 2 billion people on the internet. Who am I? What is my contribution to the world? How do I access markets? So instead of looking for a job to do something else, I look for markets who want to buy what I have to offer. Let's say I like to teach juggling. And I won't teach juggling if there's not someone to teach it to. So if I go online and say I teach juggling and I'll charge you, $10 for a thing, I put on my video camera and I go, here's how you learn how to juggle. So I'm doing my exercise and I'm getting income for what I wanted to do anyway. This idea of it's just what the information revolution meant, we forgot that. Copernican revolution, of course, was the sun was here, Earth was going around, right? So you change the orbit for the center point. That's what's happening in economics in the world. The center point is the individual, the world market revolves around it. And the driving force of economic change is non-ownership. We had public ownership, or state ownership. We got private ownership. The third category coming up is non-ownership. Who owns open source software? Who owns the 3D printing software that you get down out? Who owns the internet, etc.? The driving force is non-ownership because the world's getting too complex to maintain it by yourself. Microsoft's here. You opened up code, not because you wanted to, but you had no choice. It was too blank and complex. Millennium Project's doing the same thing. I used to write the annual State of the Future report, 16 years, by the way, not 14, but it's okay. I haven't done that much in the last couple of years. Now, so we're going to open up our own system into a collective intelligence system because it's too much to keep up. So increasing complexity is not going down. As a matter of fact, I would say one of the rules of thumbs I've got out of 40 years of experience in future stuff is whatever you forecast, imagine it being more complex than you think is possible. Then double it, and you'll get closer to the truth. What she's referring to is I usually get the classic press question, what's the most important challenge? What's the most important issue? It's very tiring because if you say water's the most important, the other guy says, well, I can solve that, he'd give me enough energy. You know, and then you got a debate and an argument, everybody says that's cool, but nothing is done, it's a waste of time. You know, the brain is not more important than the heart. You need it all on the side. Now, on the pessimism business and recovery, I think there's a great story out of Finland, something that can be done here. Finland, as you remember, was the middleman between the Soviet Union and the West. They had a minister to deal with that. It was full-time business. The Soviet Union collapsed. So did Finland, you remember. They went crashing right down. How'd they recover? According to Finland, anybody from Finland here? Yes. Good. Thank you. So one of the things that you did was brilliant, in my judgment, is you formed a unique parliamentary committee called the Committee for the Future. Now, the unique thing that they did, like other committees, parliamentary, they don't allocate money. You know, like your Commerce Committee and your Defense Committee, they all allocate money. So you got politics. They only allocate knowledge, information, and questions. So if you're the Agriculture Committee, and if I'm the Committee for the Future, then I might say, synthetic biology is going to take genetic material from column A, species B, species C, and put in a new thing all together, and your whole agricultural thing will be wiped out because every country can do it locally. What are you going to do? You got 5 to 10 years. So they're giving, in a sense, assignments around to the other committees, and they became the core of thinking, in my outside view, of how the country got itself up into a new world. Every country should have a standing committee. And now, I'm not talking about a special commission. It's a one-shot deal, it's a bunch of champagne, it's applause, and then nothing happens afterward. I'm talking about a regular, permanent, legislative committee composed of legislators, like regular committees, but no allocation of money. You have money for staff, but allocation of knowledge around. And what I would suggest you do is get a hold of the gentleman from Finland, or the embassy from Finland, and have them in as a free consultant too, and have them give you suggestions about how to create a parliamentary here. Because we know, well, I don't even belabor the point, but Finland is a good example of turning around the mindset of a country. Now you're going to get me in trouble. But before I get in trouble, I want to mention one quick thing I forgot. In my own country, people all heard about the 60s revolution. A lot of mind changes occurred at that time. Civil rights, women's liberation, etc., and so forth and so forth. What drove that, according to some analysts, was the music industry. What drove the music industry was a guy sitting down with the writers of the music, getting the ideas in. The guy's name that did that was Timothy Leary. It was a strategy, it was deliberate, it was no accident. You go back through the music in the United States in the 60s, and he had his hand in a whole lot of that vocabulary. Got in trouble on other issues, but I just want to mention that. Yeah, and the reason he was given the LSD is because he was given from Sandow's from Switzerland because he was supposed to be the best psychologist in the world. But that's another point. But his psychology was correct, which was, you want to change a country's attitude? It's through music. It's through drama, it's through television, it's the media. So I'd sit down, do some competitions, and you know, how do we get the best up? Because he was right about that. Nobody's wrong about everything. And the other thing I would say, now I get myself in trouble, how I would sell and speak about Slovenia, I've been here a few times, now I want to get in trouble. But I say, imagine a country that is a synthesis of the style of Italy and the management of Austria and Germany. And you do that synthesis and you've got a nice country.